Welcome to Rob and Tony's Cinematic Adventure. I'm Rob Wilson.
And I am Tony DeQuano.
So, Tony, before we get started on this movie, I got one thing to say. Time.
What is that?
Is on my side. Yes, it is. We'll never think of that song the same way again.
Neither will I, especially since this is my first time seeing this movie. So it's a first watch, and for whatever reason, as much as I've recall this movie, this aspect of it I was unaware of, and so
yeah, this is the second time that I've seen this movie, and I mean that I'd never been able to think of that song the same way since the first time I saw it. It's kind of like there's a few movies that have songs like classic songs that you really just can't ever think about the same way. This is one of them, and A Clockwork Orange with Singing in the Rain
is one of them. Yes. There's a couple others in there.
Yep, a couple others.
But yeah, this goes in with that. Because it shows up multiple times in this movie, and in particular in a scene where it's done very well done. It's very effective.
Yes,
it might be the best scene in the movie.
Yeah, might be. But anyway, without further ado, that movie that we were doing today is we're continuing our mini series of mostly forgotten movies before we go into our summer blockbusters, or at least not so much forgotten, but not as highly remembered. Not
right. They weren't
not
blockbusters,
as well remembered movies.
And there's certain movies that aren't blockbusters that have become ingrained, like Shawshank Redemption, right, being a famous example of one of those, or even Big Lebowski. And then there's others that just have kind of been they're not as well regarded, even if they have a good cast.
Yeah,
which this does.
This has an excellent cast, and I mean anyway, that movie that we were talking about today is, of course, the 1998 Denzel Washington, John Goodman classic, Donald Sutherland classic, if you want to call it a classic, Fallen.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because like Donald Sutherland, there's three names on the masthead for this, right? And it's Denzel, John Goodman, and Donald Sutherland. James Gandolfini plays an important role in this movie. James
Gandolfini plays a very important role. So does Elias Koteas.
Prior to his Sopranos fame.
Yeah, so does Elias Koteas. He's only in a small portion of the movie, but his impact is huge in this movie.
It's huge, and he's critical, and he plays it in the way that Elias Koteas only he can play. I mean, he's almost always going to be Casey Jones to me in some ways.
Yeah, but me too. I cannot see him without thinking Casey Jones. He was so great in that role.
He was. What perfect casting for a Turtles movie.
Yep.
But we're talking about Fallen, which is it's a very kind of talked about this with Breakdown last week. It's a movie that definitely kind of reminds me of being a kind of a late 90s type movie, early, or even extending that to like the early 2000s. This time more of a kind of a thriller, supernatural thriller, really.
Yeah.
Not an action oriented thriller that Breakdown was.
Yeah. No, but it's got fairly strong, feeling kind of like Seven, but not quite so intense.
Yes. So that's what I was gonna reference with Seven. So it's not as intense.
It kind of mixes that Seven-esque feeling with a bit of a film noir.
Well, right. So I'm glad they brought that up too. So obviously this, we'll get into the supernatural aspect of it, but it's noirish because both movies had detectives, but this is done slightly. This has more of that noir feel, than kind of that gritty. Well, again, you got this. I mean, there's serial killers are involved in this as well, but
yeah. But I mean, it's nowadays it's very difficult to do a really good like noir film.
It is,
and this one, I mean, it wasn't made today; it was made almost 30 years ago. But I think they did a good job with it, with the noir aspects of it. They hit the right marks on that.
I think they hit the right marks on a lot of the things with this movie. Yeah. It's it's not as good as Seven. It's it's twisty. But I think what's interesting about it is that it's ultimately fairly predictable.
Yeah.
But you still like where it's going. You like taking the ride where it's going.
Exactly.
Whereas, like Seven, like I don't think you would guess by the end of the movie you'd be asking what's in the box.
Yeah. Which we'll get to Seven one of these days. And we will find out what's in the box.
But this definitely is we will find out what's in that box. And it's not the dick.
Yeah. So
anyway, we're not talking about Seven. No. We're talking about Fallen. Yeah, but it's also within that that realm. There are a lot of movies that kind of continued that theme of serial killer as well.
Yeah,
which is interesting. Is like I just think I was listening to like a brief podcast about this, that you don't really have the serial killers anymore, right?
Right.
Back in like the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, right? Serial killers kind of capture the imagination of people. And
I mean, part of that, I'm sure, is because the techniques used to catch serial killers have greatly increased and gotten a lot more sophisticated.
Well, that's the thing. Is like now, especially
up through the 90s, they were still sort of rudimentary.
Between how greatly technology of DNA has advanced, but now we got cameras everywhere.
Yeah.
Like you would have to be excellent.
Yeah.
So the theory that some social scientists have kind of gone into with this, because of that, some of the similar profiles of that type of person or that personality is that personality that it's kind of morphed and shifted a bit and become the personality that would be your mass like casualty or shooter type of person, right? And then they can get, they still kind of ultimately get their name out there, whatever. Anyway, we're not talking about that. But it's a movie that does center on a serial killer, or at least to start with, and it goes from there and becomes noirish, like you were saying. And yeah, it's kind of a fascinating little movie. And I remember it when it was out, mostly from the TV spot with John Goodman pointing a gun at Denzel Washington.
Yeah.
And I remember my friend Jason Williams, his family had seen it, and they really enjoyed watching it in the theaters, and they saw a bunch of movies, and I never caught it at that time and didn't catch it after once it was released on video or DVD, and for whatever reason it's taken me almost 30 years to watch it, and I liked it. I thought it was good. I've actually watched it twice now in the last couple weeks since we determined we were going to watch this.
Yeah.
And even though I thought that again, I wouldn't, it's not a movie that's reliant on like a twist. There is, I guess, a slight twist in the movie, if you want to call it that. uh, it was still a good watching it again. And because like the noir elements are so good, the acting is so good, the characters are so good in this,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes, absolutely.
And there's just certain scenes that just stick with you.
Yeah. Now, I mean, I first saw it. I don't remember really much of the TV spots back in '98, because I mean, it really wasn't the kind of movie that I was really into at the time.
At that time,
So I didn't really pay much attention to the TV spots when they would come on. But about 2013 or so is when I first saw it. I had, for some reason, it had recently, entered my mind of, hey, here's a movie that came out a while back that I never saw, and it's an interesting premise, and I'm going to Netflix it. So that was back when Netflix was still sending out DVDs. So I got the DVD for Netflix, and I watched it, and I really enjoyed it.
yeah, I mean, like I said, Denzel's great, and I think it's one of his best roles.
Yeah, he's excellent.
And he wasn't nominated, not one of his Oscar nominated roles, but I think he's great. And he has to, he carries most of the movie, and it's got several great supporting performances. Like you said, Elias Koteas, John Goodman, and then James Gandolfini, which you kind of mentioned. Donald Sutherland just plays a Donald Sutherland type character.
Yes, he does.
And John, and only the way Donald Sutherland plays that character.
Yeah. I mean, he's got his strengths, and he used them. John Goodman was fantastic in this movie.
He was. And I was thinking about this, watching this the second time. It's like, oh yeah, this is a movie that was released in 1998, in the same year as Big Lebowski.
Mm-hmm.
And he plays such a different character.
Such a different character.
He gets more screen time. He gets more screen time in the Big Lebowski, obviously, than what he has in this. But here, he's just the dutiful, loyal partner, right?
Yeah.
And he gets a few one-liners in there, and by the end of it, except at the end where he has to, not to spoil the movie too much, has to kind of switch his range a bit on there. Mm-hmm. He can do it because he has that range.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, he perfectly switches when he needs to, because for most of the movie he's just that partner, and then at the end he gets a big scene, and he does it fantastically.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many other characters that get one scene in this movie that just absolutely nail their scenes.
Yes.
And most of it's because it's just like the nature of what their role, or at least what their part entails within that.
Yeah, right. I mean, some of it isn't even like a full scene. It's just a few lines.
Yeah, some of it's just a few lines. Yes.
But yeah, they nail it.
And some of them, there might be a couple scenes like Robert Joy, right? He gets 2 or 3 scenes in this.
Yep.
And it requires a lot of him, and he does a great job within those.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this a bit, when we were doing the Cowboys and Aliens episode, but with the cast like what we have in this movie, I'm surprised it isn't as well known.
Yes. I mean, there's several people in here. Again, I mean, he may not be the most well-known name, but like Bob Romnock, right? Like, okay, it might be not a name people automatically know, but I guarantee if you've watched any TV show in the last 30 years, he's been in pretty much almost every single one of them in at least one episode.
Yeah.
Right. Who else are we forgetting here? Right. Frank Medrano, Uncredited, we have Graham Beckel, who I think is just excellent in the one scene he has.
Yeah.
But as we got back to, it's especially the top 4 or 5 in here. I forgot to mention his James Gandolfini's sister in Sopranos, Ida Totoro, is also in it. In a smaller role in what James Gandolfini has in this. And that's right. And then Embeth Davidas.
Yeah, Embeth Davids.
Yes.
She's in here too.
Yes, sorry. It's funny, we're talking about the Evil Dead movies beforehand. She was in Army of Darkness.
Yes, she was.
But yeah, it's got that cast. And again, it's Denzel John Goodman with Donald Sutherland and James Gandolfini. And it's anyway, it's got that type of premise you would think that would kind of stick around.
Yeah.
And then as you started the show, like it uses a famous Rolling Stones song in such a fantastic way.
Yes, it does.
And then the movie ends with the Stones and another song, but still.
No, it ends. Yes, it ends with a Stones song, but it's not the Stones version. It ends with the Guns N' Roses version of it.
Yeah. And even technically, what's funny is that "Time Is on My Side" is actually not Stones. They did not write the Stones. They did not write "Time Is on My Side." Mm-hmm. It's their version of it. So they picked it up not shortly after someone else originally recorded it, and then they made it famous.
Yeah,
or they endured it. I made it enduring. I guess you should say. Plus, this movie takes place in Philly, by the way.
Yes, it does. Yes,
it's a late '90s movie that takes place in Philly that was not made by M. Night Shyamalan.
That's kind of rare nowadays. Yeah, see a movie that takes place in Philly that wasn't a Shyamalan movie.
What is this? Our second Philly movie? We had Rocky.
Not this one. Well, we did have Signs that wasn't really Philly. It was outside of Philly. It was Bucks County.
Outside Philly, yeah.
It's Bucks County, Philly, Pennsylvania.
It's outside of Philly.
Yeah.
I'm not going to call that because it has to takes place in the farm. It's Bucks County.
Not far away from Philly.
Not in the way that, say, Sixth Sense and Unbreakable.
Yeah.
We're definitely taking place in Philly.
Yeah.
Or Lady in the Water, and anyhow. Yeah. I forgot we did. Yeah, I kind of forgot we did Signs last year. So, yeah. Overall, I think just the music, just the overall cinematography, the set. It's just all in all is a well produced, mid-budget thriller.
Yeah.
Right, which you don't get anymore.
No, you really don't.
Especially with an A-list cast that it has.
Yeah, but this is also back in their earlier days, so they weren't quite to the status that they are now.
True.
So they could afford them at the time with a mid-budget movie.
So, but yeah, no, it's
I mean, Donald Sutherland, it wasn't really at the beginning, like toward the beginning of his time, but
yeah, he's the type of person though. Like he's he's made enough movies. If he likes the script as an actor, he's going to try to take it.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, John Goodman wasn't really at the beginning of his career either, but
yeah, he already had Roseanne.
He had some stuff in the early '90s and the '80s and all that, but Denzel was still more or less making his mark in Hollywood. I mean, he was pretty well established at this time, but he wasn't quite the superstar he is now.
We forgot to mention this movie was also directed by Gregory Hoblit,
Yes.
who
Yes. Which every time I see his name,
prior to this,
I have to take
had
another
done
look at it because it looks like Hobbit.
Primal Fear with Richard Gere and Edward Norton. Another movie that we like that's on that kind of forgotten spectrum is Frequency.
Yep.
Another one would be Heart's War. What I never realized though is that he directed a bunch of episodes of NYPD Blue.
Oh,
kind of prior to getting into kind of Hollywood, release motion pictures. So,
all right.
But yeah, I don't know about a whole lot more else to say prior
to
jumping into it.
Yeah, I think we should just jump right in. So, as always, spoiler alert, we are going to be talking about this entire movie, beginning, middle, and end. So if you have not seen it, go ahead and pause the podcast, watch the movie, come back and listen. If you have seen the movie, or if you just don't mind spoilers and keep on listening, but you have been warned, we are going to be spoiling this entire movie. So, let's get into it. So, I like the way that they do the credits in this.
I was kind of thinking about that as well. Yes.
It's sort of the cryptic symbols with the credits and
the cryptic symbol font. Like someone was going into Wingdings on Microsoft Word.
Yep.
Like, how could we make this kind of like kind of creepy and at the same time like mysterious?
Well, at that time, would they have been using Microsoft Word or Microsoft Works?
That's a good question. Yeah, but and then they it morphs into the next names and titles, right? And you got the music.
It's kind of got that eerie music playing. Yeah, that eerie supernatural type music.
But it's very reminiscent of a lot of credits of that time. But it works. It does.
Yeah, it helps bring that 7 feel to it.
Absolutely.
Right off the bat.
Which we will be doing 7 one day, if you're concerned about that. We will be doing 7 one of these days.
We will be. So, anyway, we start getting a voiceover. We hear Denzel Washington's voice.
And he wants to tell us about the time he almost died.
Yes, he wants to tell us about the time he almost died. And then we see Denzel running through the woods, like kind of stumbling, half crawling.
Yeah. And there's snow on the ground. It's not a lot of snow.
Yeah.
But it looks like it's kind of fresh snow. It's an inch or two.
And then he just collapses. And then the voiceover goes, after saying, I want to tell you about the time that I almost died, we then hear Denzel say, well, I'm not going to take you back to the beginning because that would have been way too long ago. It'd be way too much time. So, we're going to go to something a little bit closer. And it cuts to a jail. Cuts to a prison. Not a jail. Cuts to a prison.
Yeah, it's nighttime and I guess, is it raining? I can't remember if it's raining or not. It's at night.
I think it is. Yeah.
And there's a couple of cars driving towards this jail.
Wait, no, it's not. It's not raining at this point. It's raining later. It's not raining at this point.
That's what I thought. Because you get Denzel in the car and Donald Sutherland's in the car, and they're pulling up to the prison. And there's some protesters out there, right? They're protesting someone that's about to be executed. And we find out quickly it's this serial killer that Denzel Washington's character caught.
Yes.
Right?
A serial killer named Edgar Reese.
Edgar Reese, played by Elias Koteas, as we mentioned him earlier. This is his role. And now we're talking about Denzel. His character's name is John Hobbs. And Reese wants to speak with him before he's executed.
Yeah.
Right. So they bring him in into his cell, and they inform him that there's this documentary crew that's there.
Yeah. So they never really
they're
make
filming
it clear if they do this with every serial killer that they execute, or
right.
if it's just because he was so despicable. You know,
Wait, was he that notorious?
Yes, that's the word I'm looking for. Notorious. Was he that notorious of a serial killer that it warrants a documentary crew?
Was he the infamous?
Is he the infamous El Guapo? That's more than famous.
Yeah, they don't make clear that. Like, okay. Or is it just because they do this with a lot of serial killers?
Or is it just like a general thing that this prison does for any executions?
There could be that too. Right? We could tell that, okay, there's people protesting this, that, and okay. Yeah, I mean, by that time, that's a common thing to see people protesting in the execution.
I mean, I would venture to,
even for a notorious serial killer.
I would lean more toward that. It's just he's so notorious of a serial killer that he warranted a documentary crew to come in and film a documentary about his execution.
That's the way I lean. But so they're there, and they're it's important that they're there because we're gonna get the footage later will be important.
Mm-hmm.
And they're sitting there talking, and he Reese tries to shake Hobbs' hand. He does, and then you get the look on Reese's face, and he's like,
the surprise.
Like, oh, that doesn't.
And then he kind of just pulls his hand away,
and then he starts speaking like a language, and almost sounds gibberish.
Yeah, almost sounds gibberish. Almost sounds like he's speaking in tongues.
No one recognizes what it is. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of saying it. It's like he's speaking in tongues. And he's smoking, right? And they and he shakes with his left hand, right? Yes,
he shakes with his left hand.
Okay. And so then and then he says a few more things in English, and then goes back to kind of speaking in tongues.
He says a few things in English, and then Hobbs gets up to leave. And as Hobbs is leaving, then he says something that sounds very much like German. And so Hobbs asks him, "So what? You're a Nazi now?"
Oh, that's right.
He's like
Dutch.
It's Dutch. I'm speaking Dutch.
And then Hobbs says bye, right?
Yeah.
And so he leaves, and then finally cuts back, and they escort him in. He's going to be executed in the gas chamber, right?
Yeah.
So they escort him into the gas chamber, and you have Hobbs there, and he's standing next to Donald Sutherland, and Sutherland's character's name is
Lieutenant Stanton.
Right? And then you have a whole host of people kind of sitting, and I'm sure some are journalists, some are probably family of victims of priests, right?
Yeah.
And we see the executioner, and he begins the process of releasing the gas.
Yeah. So you see him he's testing the lines and all that, and then and he keeps cutting back to the clock, and it's ticking down.
And the actor's name that's the executioner is Leon Ruggiero. He was one of the boys in Dead Poets Society. Anyway, so yeah, it's counting down, and finally, it releases in, and as you might expect, it's not like it's it's not exactly the most painless death. He's
I mean it's
the gas and poisons working on his body, right?
It's not like lethal
twitching around,
where
spasming.
Chances are it would knock him out before it actually kill him,
right?
But yeah, it's gas chamber, so he's breathing this stuff in. He can feel it in his lungs and all this before it kills him.
And he said, "Oh, and before he dies, right?
He starts singing, "Time is on my side. Yes, it is
on my side. Yes, it is." Right. So, yeah. So that's what he's saying. Actually, once he gets in there, and he kind of mocks the people as well, and then before the gas is administered. And then after he dies, right, the point of view kind of changes, and the filter changes, right?
Changes sort of and
it kind of goes up through roof, of the chamber,
sort of a wavy sort of point of view shot, coming up above, like through the ceiling of the gas chamber, and then coming down and zooming in on the executioner.
Yeah, it's good. It circles around. It's kind of looking down at some of the people that are sitting there, and then finally, it focuses on the executioner.
Well, and it also focuses on Hobbs before it goes to focus on the executioner.
Right, and so then it cuts, and you have Hobbs, and he's at this bar now, right? And there's his partner Jonesy's there,
played by John Goodman.
And then you also have Lou, who is also one of the detectives.
Yeah, James Gandolfini
at the station. As James Gandolfini.
Yeah, so he goes and joins. So Hobbs goes and joins the two of them. The two of them
they've been drinking for a while, right?
There's beer bottles all over the table.
There's beer bottles all over. The both of them are smoking. They all, and we find out that Hobbs has recently quit smoking, right?
Which is important.
And yes, it is important. And they have all these imported bottles.
Yeah.
Right.
So they sit down and Lou is like, "All right, what do you want, Hobbs? We got Beck's, we got Guinness, we got Bass."
It's like, I want a Budweiser.
And Lou's like, "Why do you want a Budweiser? We're drinking imports. We're drinking imported tonight." And I was like, "I want a Budweiser."
And then like the bartender comes over, and you can tell that Lou knows the bartender well. He's like, "Don't you want like a Bud Ice or something?"
Yeah, it's like, if you're gonna get a Bud, at least get like a Bud Ice.
She's just like, no, he wants a Bud. So he lets that be, and as they're drinking, they're talking, we find that Lou is newer to their precinct, right? He's been there for about 5 or 6 months, and they have a conversation about he getting this impression that Hobbs is very much by the book, straight lace, right? So they have a conversation about it.
Yeah. And he's telling him, what would it take to get you to break the law? Everybody has a limit. What would it take to get you to break the law? And Hobbs, I love his reply. It's something along the lines of, we're here, like, what was it? Like 95% of the choices that we make as cops are for the betterment of society.
Right. And then, and then John, Jonesy kind of goes in and he puts it like at 0.5% higher, right? He's going to be exact about it.
Yeah. So he's like, okay, 95.5%. But then he's like, if we waver even just a little bit, then we're no better than the criminals.
Right.
So, but then you get Lou going, okay, well, maybe I should be drinking Budweiser now.
So he's like, I think Gracie's the bartender. He's like, Gracie, get this foreign shit off the table.
Bring us 3 Buds.
Right. So that ends that scene. And we said this takes place in Philly. So now we're with South Philly. And of course, it's gotta be at Pat and Gino's.
Yep.
Right. And we see the executioner there, right? And
he pulls up
his car.
He pulls up in a convertible. He's got this gold blazer on.
I think this is hilarious because I'm looking at he's got a decent car. He's got this blazer. How's this dude spending his money? He's a and I can't imagine he's getting paid that much by the prison system.
What I'm thinking is that it's not his choice in what he's wearing.
This is a really good point as we see what happens after this, right?
Yeah.
Because this is a really fascinating scene because he gets out and he touches somebody, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you kind of see him and he kind of looks disoriented.
Yeah. Where am I?
And then that person kind of gives him a look and they start walking around. And they've got all these people that start touching each other somehow, right? And it's the same thing each time it happens. After they touch someone, right? They just kind of look like, for them, it's been 2 or 3 seconds. For the executioner, it's probably been several hours.
Yeah.
And we'll get to what that is. You'll understand more of that later.
But then
eventually it comes
Charles.
up.
Charles is in line at
there's
Pat's.
there's a certain. He's at Pat's, right? Yeah. And there's this guy that kind of comes up behind him and bumps into him as Charles is kind of turning around from the window
from getting his sandwich, getting his cheesesteak,
and they kind of look at each other, right? And then as Charles is walking away, he gets a smile on his face, right?
And he kind of tosses the bag, catches it with the other hand, because he's holding it in his right.
You can see all of a sudden his demeanor's changed, his posture's changed,
and he's holding the bag in his right hand, right? When he's walking away from the window from Pat's, and then he sort of tosses the bag up in the air and grabs it with his left hand and carries it with his left from then on.
Right, and he crosses the street and he can see Gino's on the other corner, right? And he comes at this window and there's this guy that knows Charles, right? And he's like, "Oh, Charles, why did it take you so long?" Right? So there's this girl up on, and then Charles just cuts him off. It's like, you know what you would look like with this sandwich up your ass? And the guy's like, "What, Charles? What? It's like, you look like a fat, stupid fuck with a sandwich up your ass."
And it turns out this guy is his boss. This guy is Charles's boss.
Was his boss.
Yeah. So next we get Charles going home because he's been fired.
Right. And now it's the middle of the night. We get a phone call to Hobbs. Hobbs in his bed and he answers the phone and no one's on the other line. Right. And he hangs up. And then is that when it cuts to the apartment? And
I think so. It cuts to the apartment and Charles is in there.
Charles is in there. It's like morning now.
His teeth.
He's brushing his teeth. That's right.
He's brushing his teeth and then, well, actually, no, he's eating his breakfast first before he brushes his teeth.
His cornflakes. That's right.
Cornflakes and the milk. And there's a little bowl of sugar that he carries over the table. It's just a small little circular table in the middle of the kitchen.
Yeah.
Just one chair. And he sits down. He very carefully arranges the cereal box and the milk. Arrangement. Puts them at the perfect angles and all that. And the bowl of sugar right in front of his bowl. And, starts eating his cornflakes. And then it shows him in the bathroom brushing his teeth. And, he's got some nasty teeth.
Yes.
And he's checking his teeth out while he's brushing. And then the camera pans over to the bathtub.
And there's a body.
There's a dead body in the bathtub. And then we jump over to the precinct, right? Don't we?
Yes, we do.
Or yeah, because the body has been found.
Well, I think he gives another call about and gives him a hint on the location.
Wait, one of the things before we completely skipped over this part, back when Hobbs was talking to Reese in the cell. Reese asked him if he likes riddles.
Oh, yes.
And
yes,
Hobbs
that's right.
said no.
That's the English part of it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
He asked him if he likes riddles, and Hobbs says no. And then Reese just goes right into his riddle. He's like, why is there a space between Lyons and Sikowski?
And that's the point when Hobbs like, you know what, bye-bye.
Mm-hmm.
Because it just makes zero sense whatsoever. But yeah, so that's what happens. So you get back to the precinct, and there's the call about the location. It was just how they know to check it out, and there's a dead body, and there's the arrangement that we were talking about with the bowl, the sugar, the cornflakes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're looking around, and they're finding different clues.
There's no fingerprints,
no,
they did find fingerprints, but they can't match them to anybody.
Right. And then they finally look behind like a painting or a picture, and there's lions. There's a space
with question marks.
Sikowski. Yeah. All of a sudden, Hobbs like, oh shit!
But they find on the body.
So
there are two puncture. There are two puncture marks in the chest.
Trying to discuss this.
Yeah, the body has two puncture marks on the chest.
That's right.
That look like they were made by a syringe.
And it's kind of weirdly contorted as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, when they get back to the precinct, they're discussing this and trying to figure out. And they're thinking, well, okay, is this a copycat killer? Because this seems, looking at all the evidence of it, it seems similar to Reese's killings.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this information there that links the two of them with the riddle in the wall. Or is this potentially a cop that knows about this, right? Or is it an accomplice that they did not, they're not aware of?
They didn't know about,
right? So, and they're discussing, and they talk about those names, right? And what James Gandolfini, right?
Yeah, Lou mentions, Sikowski was an officer here, a while back,
right? And he remembered, seeing a plaque with their names as like, detective or cop of the year, or something
with
to that
some
effect.
sort of commendation.
Yeah, right. And so they search around, and they find like in a basement the plaque that had like those years, right?
And so,
which has since been taken down because I guess time moves on, and they just move plaques or whatever, right?
Time is not on the plaque side, apparently.
And then they look, and it's from like they look in the 60s, and there is a blank space between two cops.
Their names are Lyons and Sikowski. And there's a blank space between them. So now
they had to figure out who that person is.
So now Hobbs has to figure out who that person is. And so that
person's name is Milano, by the way.
Yes, the person's name is Milano. Which you get you get Hobbs back at home on his computer on his late 90s internet.
Yes, thank you. I almost forgot about this. He's using late 90s search engines.
Yes,
and I felt so seen.
Yes, back before Google.
It's like, all right, so
under the search bar, there's a link for America Online.
Yes. For
he's using web crawler, by the way.
Yes,
that's the search engine he's using.
There used to be dozens of search engines.
Hotbot was my favorite back in the day.
I loved Hotbot.
I used to use Hotbot all the time.
Hotbot, Dogpile, Ask Jeeves.
Yep.
And Yahoo, like they started making their mark,
mm-hmm.
right? Which is funny because Yahoo is referenced in Howlett's next movie, Frequency.
Yes. Yes.
Because it's anyway. And then Google's like, oh well, we're just gonna have all your results. I'm gonna call ourselves Google.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's perfectly late 90s, and I love it.
It's great.
Searching it. Anyway,
it's great.
So he finds a name, and it's this detective. His last name is Milano. He finds he has a daughter named Greta that still lives in Philadelphia. Yeah. So he goes to her.
So he tracks down Greta Milano.
And he goes up and knocks on her door, and she, kind of reluctantly lets him in. She offers him coffee, and he notices that she's got angels, like pictures,
all over the place.
Icons, statues of angels,
just all over
her apartment. It's not a small apartment. Like, it's got a good sized living room. It's got like a good sized kitchen, probably like a good sized 1-bedroom apartment. We find out she's a professor, so she makes decent money. And
he mentions the angels. He mentions the angels, and she says, I teach theology.
That's right. Yes, at the university. And she's just kind of wondering, why, he's interested in the case, and if there was some lead or anything like that. And she's like, oh yeah, it's that cabin was family for generations.
Yeah, because so what he had discovered about Detective Milano, about Greta's father, is that he was on the plaque, so right. he had been he had received commendations and whatnot, and he was in excellent standing with the department, but he had been accused of several murders, and then went to his cabin and died. It was, believed to be a gun cleaning accident.
Yes. Which obviously wasn't, but anyway.
Yeah.
And so, and he just says, well, I was, I was the man that arrested, the killer that was murdered the other day, executed the other day, Reese. And then maybe heard about it. And she's like, well, is there a connection? He's like, well, I don't know. And he's like, and finally she's like, well, did Reese like to sing? Right. And
yeah. And
it's like, yeah.
Did he try to shake your hand or touch you in some way?
It's like, yes. Was he left-handed? It's like,
I think so.
Yes. And finally she's like, well, it's like, well, I know my father was innocent. Right. And he's like, well, how do you know? She's like, well, I know. And then, they kind of wrap up the conversation. And as he's leaving, he's like, she asks him, like, do you believe in God?
And he says, I have seen things in my line of work that make faith very difficult.
Yeah. He says, hey, I've been to church occasionally, but yeah, I've seen things that make it difficult.
And then so he asks, if I have more questions for you, can I call? And she says, yes. I'd rather you didn't.
But that's not the last time they're going to talk.
Nope. So then it's the next day, and he's at home. He's getting up in the morning, and we find out that his brother and nephew have come to live with him.
That's right. So, and that might even be before this scene. Like
it might have been.
I'm glad he brought it up because
his brother, who it's never really said exactly what it is, but he seems to have some sort of mental disorder.
He's like Forrest Gump.
Yeah. Whether he's
a really nice guy. I love this character. I love this guy.
Yeah, me too.
And Art. I hate what has to happen to him. Yeah,
his brother Art and Art's son Sam.
Yes.
Art's wife left him.
Yep.
And so once she left, then Hobbs,
took both of them
in.
And Art feels like he's a burden to them, and the Hobbs is like, no, family, I love you guys, right? This is the right thing to do. Just don't make him any more peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
Yeah.
Apparently that's all he makes.
Sam is sick of peanut butter and jelly, and Art is making him his lunch.
I'm sorry, but no, I would just keep taking PBJ over cafeteria food.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But that's just me.
Especially with a good red raspberry preserves.
Oh yes. Good peanut butter with good jam or preserves, and you're golden.
Yeah.
What's interesting about this is you have this thing that's lingering in your mind. Is there's a bowl of cereal there too. It's like, is that box of cereal gonna factor into this movie? Right? Are they like, you're looking at it and you're thinking about it because of the scene earlier, right?
Yep.
So, but we do eventually get another evening scene with Denzel, and he's walking, and he gets a voiceover, right, about how he likes walking at night.
Yeah, he likes to walk at night.
Sometimes you can pass someone, and you don't even kind of look at each other, but that they're kind of staring at you or trying to figure you out, or
it could
something
be
along those lines.
It could be someone that someone you went to school with, or it could be a complete stranger.
So they're walking down the sidewalk. He's walking down the sidewalk, and Charles is walking up towards him.
And Charles is wearing a blue coat.
Yes.
Like a blue coat. Kind of like a style of coat, sort of like it's almost like a pea coat style.
Yeah, that's a good description.
But it's a style of coat that Charles has never really struck me as wearing.
No.
Kind of like the executioner in his gold blazer.
Yes. Where are these coming from? So, but he passes, Hobbs, and kind of catches, kind of gives, stares at him, and they walk by. And eventually, he keeps walking. And then there's this big guy that he ends up, kind of walking into. Right? And now it's Charles that looks kind of confused, right?
Yeah. The big guy is played by Frank Medrano, by the way.
Yeah, Frank Medrano. Who is just listed as Charles Killer.
Yeah. So spoiler alert. About 10 seconds later, we get Charles going into his apartment.
By the way, I do Frank Medrano. So, you might know him from Shawshank Redemption, where he played Fat Ass.
Yep.
He was the prisoner that gets beat to death. Andy's first day. By Clancy Brown. Right.
Not really a major character in that movie, so it's not really much of a spoiler.
No, it's not.
but But yeah,
He was
so
also in the movie. He was also in the movie Sleepers, where he played Fat Moncho.
okay,
So, but yeah, so it's not much later, and we cut to Charles's apartment, and he's working on this little hot plate, making like grilled cheese, right? And he's got his cordless phone.
he's talking.
This is the '90s. Not everyone has cell phones. Everybody at this point basically still has a landline, right? And
so is it his mom that he's talking to?
No, he's talking to he calls his boss, and it's his wife that picks up.
That's right. Yeah, it was his boss's wife. I knew it was a woman that he was talking to.
And so he's like, I must have gotten drunk or something because I don't remember anything from the last day or two. He's like, Charles, like, no, like he's always been so kind to you and he always really liked you, but like he quit because you insulted him. He's like, what? And then she says goodbye. She hangs up, and he's making like grilled cheese on this hot plate, right? And he gets a pounding on the door, right?
Yeah. So he goes to open the door, and he's got the chain hooked on there, a little dinky chain that wouldn't really stop a guy Frank Madrano's size.
Or really anyone that might be possessed.
Yeah. So
anyway,
Frank Madrano, Charles's killer, is standing on the other side of the door and just busts the door open, and just attacks Charles. Starts stabbing him in the chest with the syringe.
Yeah. And then we kind of cut again, and it's kind of back in the little kitchenette that Charles has. It's Frank Madrano there now, and now he's got a bowl and a box of cereal, and
he's calling on the phone. Yeah, and he's carefully arranging them exactly how they were at the other apartment. He's got the box of cereal, he's got the milk, he's got his bowl, and he's even got the bowl of sugar. It's a different style of sugar bowl, but he's got the sugar bowl.
And he makes a phone call, right? And he's, we get a phone, we get the phone ringing back at Hobbs's place. Because no one's there, and then he hangs up, and then looks like his brother and nephew have kind of fallen asleep on the couch. They were watching TV or a movie or something, and he wakes them up, and they go to bed.
Takes them off to bed.
We get back to the precinct the next morning, and again, it's someone else has another clue that tells him about where to find a body. But before he gets his phone call, right? He said he looked back more into Reese's past.
Mm-hmm.
And he found out when Reese was in high school, he played baseball.
Yeah. And he was right.
And he was right-handed.
He threw right-handed.
He batted right-handed. Right? And then, and Jonesy's looking like, so he was ambidextrous?
Yeah, so you're making a big deal because he was ambidextrous?
So, yeah, they hop over to the crime scene, and Charles's body's in the bathtub this time, and he's in the same position.
Yep, same position as the guy before. And so they're able to, they're talking. He's like, yeah, we were able to match the fingerprints from the bowl in the last apartment, and they were his. They were the guy in the bathtub. And so, okay, so this guy went and murdered somebody and then got home and was murdered in the exact same way?
Yeah. So this is it's all confusing now because I was like, okay, you can imagine it was like an accomplice, but it's starting to try to figure out all the oddities around there, right?
Yeah.
By the way, I forgot to mention, I noticed in the scene there, I guess before Charles touches this killer. He's getting off a subway train, right? It's a SEPTA. It's Philly. There's a Radio Shack ad. I'm like, yes. That's also 90s Radio Shack. Gotta love it.
Yes.
Anyway. So, and then they look behind the mirror, and then what's the message this time?
The message this time is
this is question marks again.
Yeah, wasn't it?
And there's still a message. Oh,
look in the mirror.
That's the other thing. It's not even the message there, but each one of them had a number on their chest.
Yeah.
Look in the mirror. That's what it was.
Just look in the mirror.
But then
written behind the mirror.
Each of the victims also had a number on their chest.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I forget which one was which, but one was 18.
The first one was 18. 2. The second one was 2.
Which would, yeah, that would make sense. 18 and 2, which we'll get to. Right. So back at the precinct, and we haven't mentioned it yet, but Hobbs has this coin that he just fidgets with, right? You know, he kind of, twists it around, turns it around in his fingers when he's thinking. Right? And so, he goes up to his boss, right? He goes up to Donald Sutherland, the lieutenant, kind of about some of this information. He's like, oh yeah, well, Milano, yeah, he was kind of a tight ass and this and that. It's like, but like you probably don't want to pursue him, right?
Yeah.
And you get a scene as he's thinking, Jonesy's talking with the lieutenant. It's like, how do you think he's doing? He's like, oh, he's fine. Well, if this gets too much for him, like, let me know. And he's like, I will, and if it gets too much for me, I'll let you know too. Right? So they get Hobbs, and he gets down in the basement. He's looking more at this case with Milano, and he has a map and a photo then of the cabin.
Yeah, so he finds a map of the cabin.
And Lou comes down to the basement, and Lou's like, "Oh, what are you looking at?" He's like, "Oh, it's, nothing. Right? I was looking at some old files." And
so Lou kind of just brushes it. Okay. Yeah.
Wishes aside, whatever. He looks like Lou just kind of came in from like a jog or something, right? Mm-hmm. And that's when Hobbs decides to take a little road trip up to the mountains.
Oh, and by the way, cabin, we haven't mentioned this in here yet, but James Gandolfini has a great mustache in this movie.
Yes. Well, I was thinking about this because we were talking about him. Like, this is not long before Sopranos. And he plays some of these scenes in a very Tony Soprano type of way.
Yeah.
But with the mustache.
Yeah.
And it's a glorious, glorious cop stash.
Yeah. It's thicker. It's thicker than the Dennis Franz.
Yes.
But it's not quite the Sam Elliott.
No, it's not.
But it is sort of a handlebar. But not quite.
Mm-hmm.
Not quite the Sam Elliott handlebar that we get in Big Lebowski.
Not quite there. It takes a lot to pull that off. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't know if
Gandolfini couldn't have pulled out the Sam Elliott. But it is an impressive mustache, though.
My Charles is one of the coaches on this team this year. Kind of has like a handlebar stash. It's not as long as the Sam Elliott type, mm-hmm. right? It's a little bit shorter, and it's not gray either, right? But anyway, so he rides up to the cabin. He gets there, and we look at this like these are the same woods that we saw at the beginning of the movie.
Yes, and the same cabin because we saw at the beginning of the movie we saw like an aerial view of a cabin, and this looks very similar. So
he goes in the kitchen, and there's leaves, and the place has been abandoned for years. You can tell.
Some of the windows are broken, and
But the body tape's still on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah, the chalk outline's still there. But
So he finally goes down to the basement and he's looking around. And he sees this book and it's got like all these demons and angels
first, no, he's looking around in the rafters.
That's right.
Up in the rafters, he sees something, and so he goes and it's like a secret hiding spot where there are these two books. One is bigger, and then one is smaller. And so he pulls them down and he's sort of flipping through the big book, and there's these pictures of, angels and demons and, all this stuff in there. And then he's flipping the other one, and the other one looks very much like a Bible. They never specify if it is or not, but just
they don't say.
When he's flipping through the pages, just looking at the pages, the style of the pages, how things are arranged on there. It looks like it could be a Bible.
Is that the one that has the photograph that falls out?
Yes. Yes, I think it is the smaller one that has the photograph that falls out.
Which, and the photograph is from the basement. And it's pointed towards the wall. It's the far wall over there is like his right.
Mm-hmm. So he goes over, and this wall that's very shoddily painted.
Looks like something's been covered up on it now.
Yeah, looks like something has been there's paint that's clearly not the paint that's on the rest of the walls. And so he gets some paint thinner. There's some of that, a can of paint thinner, in the basement. So he grabs a rag, starts wiping away at the paint. As he's wiping. I mean, is it a wall or is it a mirror that's painted over?
Mirror. That's what it is.
Because it said, the message before said, look in the mirror.
That's right. Because there was another message that was in there too that said just like, look. Because when he gets to the basement, it's like, yeah, look. Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay.
So, because, it looks like a mirror, but then later he says it's just it was painted over on the wall. So they don't specify that it's a mirror later when he's talking about it. But it looks very much like a mirror that he's wiping the paint off of. So
he wipes it off.
Wipes it off and sees the word.
Well, he starts wiping away, and finally he sees a ladder.
Yeah, so he's wiping it away, and he sees finally the word Azazel,
and so
written across this mirror.
Then Azazel, right? It means nothing to him.
Yeah, it means nothing to him. But he goes and he starts researching, and and then he
shows back up at Milano's house.
No, he doesn't show up at Milano's house. He sees her.
Not yet.
Yeah, he sees her walking toward her car. And he pulls up in his car.
That's right.
And he gets out and he greets her. Right. He's like, "Oh, Detective Hobbs." He's like, "Hey, how are you today?" And, she's going to get in her car. He's like, "Oh, let me get that for you." And then, she's trying to brush him off. He's like, "What does Azazel mean to you?"
Azazel mean?
Yeah, what does Azazel mean to you?
And he's like, what?
And
like, yeah, Azazel, the evil spirit of the wilderness. It's like, yeah, your dad painted it over in the cabin. At first he's like, "Oh yeah, I went up to your father's cabin." That's what he says first.
Yeah,
right. It's like, "Oh yeah, this is very beautiful up there, isn't it?
Place, isn't it? Right by the lake."
And then he's like, "What does Azazel mean?"
Yeah,
in a very Denzel Washington type of way, also.
Yeah,
by the way. So, yeah, and so he just says, and you can tell he's researched it. Evil spirit of the wilderness, and he read that these things could move by touch. And then she just very bluntly says, "Leave this alone. Drop this case."
Mm-hmm. Drop this case. And then he's like,
"I can't do that. I'm a cop.
I don't really have a choice. It's my job." And so,
like, if you have anyone that you care about, you get anything about this case.
If you even have one person that you care about, forget about this case.
And so, it cuts back to the precinct, and now he's talking to his lieutenant, and they're talking to some of the possibilities at how it could.
His lieutenant is getting a Diet Coke out of the Coke machine.
That's right. Yes. And
the old style Coke machine.
He's like, yeah, well, it could be a cop, but like, the brain trust upstairs definitely thinks it's a cop. And it's like, keep, and so they leave it at that. He goes back to Jonesy, and they're thinking about these things, and they're talking, and someone says like, "Oh yeah, I forgot." That's Lieutenant tells him that the calls to his house came from the crime scenes around the time of the murders.
Yeah.
Right. So the cops have that piece of information now, right? They check the phone records. So,
yeah. So then,
I get at that time. That's when they've talked with the guy, the linguist. Right. They had a linguist come in to interpret the tape.
Yes.
From the documentary, and he says that it's an ancient language. I believe it's Syrian Aramaic.
Yes, Syrian Aramaic.
And like I can tell that's what the language is, but like only some very primitive tribes actually speak it.
Yeah, nowadays there's only a few tribes.
Off the tape right away, I can't translate it. If you leave me the tape, I can work on it and come up with a translation for you. Right. Mm-hmm. And I love it because the guy's he's very geeky. He's very excited about this tape.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they leave it with him. He takes it. Where's my thing? There we go. So is that when? Let me look at here then. I want to say past a scene. I hope I haven't passed the scene on here.
Because have we had the scene yet where Hobbs and Jonesy are watching the tape? Or does that come after they get the translation?
I think they're watching that when they come in, saying that the guys come in.
Okay. Okay, because then we get then we get another shot of people touching each other and the thing moving between people, and then it gets to Lou. Lou comes in.
That's what happens, right? So he's after the linguist comes in. And then he gets the rough translation again, and that's right. He's talking about how like I can't pass to you by touch, and then it becomes like this mocking thing about I'll find my way, and then they'll regret it. And
he's like, this. I can't get to you by touch, but when I'm in spirit form, I won't get to you, but I'll make you pay, something like that.
Right. It's very threatening. And he's watching it, and you look out because he's got the lights off in the thing, and you look out the window, and kind of across from him, you see this cat, this tabby cat,
and
right, and then you kind of get the point of view of the cat, and it's kind of back to that filter that we saw after the execution,
and the cat goes up and rubs up against,
starts walking
Lou's
away,
leg.
the camera's following the cat. And brushes by this guy, gets out of the cab.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And says this cab driver, and he walks up, to the front desk at the station. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm supposed to be picking up this guy that's being released." Right.
And real quick, what we didn't mention when Hobbs went to the cabin, as he's pulling up in the car, as he's getting out of the car, we see just in the corner of the screen, we see this cat run toward the cabin and run into a little hole at the bottom of the cabin. You know, you don't really think much of it.
It's kind of like, because the cabin kind of has a kind of like a front, like little porch patio type area.
This gray cat that runs
underneath of it is not, just, there's space underneath of it, right?
This gray cat runs up under the cabin.
So,
but anyway, so back to
the cat,
present time where
versus by the cab driver, and he's there, and then
this is an orange cat.
He touches someone, one of the cops that's working there at the station, and now you have multiple different people on the station touching each other,
just like they were on the street earlier.
And eventually, one touches Lou. And Lou comes around, right?
Who walks in,
and
starts talking to
He leans
Hobbs.
over kind of menacingly a little bit, He's trying to seem friendly, but it's also very menacingly the way he does it.
And he's like, "Hey, Hobbs, earlier when I saw you in the basement.
Remember that thing you were looking at down in the basement the other day?
What was it?"
I was like, "Oh, it was just a map." "Oh, a map of what?" "Oh, yeah, well, I felt like I wanted to, get out of town and get some fresh air." And it's like, "Oh, yeah, like I like to do that sometimes too. Can you tell me about it? Can you come here?" And he's trying to get him to come closer.
And finally, Hobbs kind of leans in a little bit, and Lou starts singing, "Time is on my side. Yes, it is." And then Hobbs, just gets this look on his face, this surprised look. And he's like, "Why are you singing that? Are you mocking me? Are you,
And then this one of the other cops that works in the station there, right, walks by, and Lou touches him.
Yep, Mike.
And all of a sudden, Lou changes, right? It's Mike.
Played by Reno Wilson.
He starts singing that. And he right now, you kind of a view of Mike kind of singing it, and Lou, James Gandolfini's just kind of looking kind of
confused,
dazed a bit, right? And confused because the last he remembered, he was sitting down at his desk doing something, and now he's standing around and hearing someone singing of Stones.
Yeah, so he's like, "Why are you singing that?" What? He's like, and Lou's like, "I wasn't singing. Mike was singing, but I wasn't singing."
Well, that's not. He says that later. He's like, "Lou, what are you singing?" Like, and Lou's just looking around, and he follows Mike as Mike then goes. He's walking around, and there's this walking out of the station. There's a guy, this man and wife. They're both wearing like fur coats.
They are
right.
They are billed as Society Man and Society Woman.
Yes,
they are a well-dressed couple. They're obviously, they obviously have some money.
I liked how the man is about a foot shorter than his wife.
Yes,
shorter than his wife.
Yes. Yes.
And the man looks at him as they're leaving, and he's got this smirk on his face.
Yeah.
And
Ray Zifo is who plays Society Man, and Cynthia Hayden plays Society Woman, his wife.
So they're walking down the street, and then Denzel Washington just screams at him. He just starts shouting in
Syrian Aramaic. Syrian Aramaic. And
first, the guy starts talking to him, right? And they turn around, they start walking her away, and he touches the woman. And then she turns around and is like, "How did he know all that? I'm impressed." Right?
Yeah, because he's actually speaking Syrian Aramaic to him.
Yeah. And then she's like, she kind of mocks him about and finally she says, like, "There are some things though you shouldn't know," right? And she turns around and start walking again, and she touches the man again. And then he turns around, right? He kind of smiles.
Touches someone else who's walking in the direction.
He touches another guy. Someone else starts walking by him, right?
And it just goes, basically, people that are walking back and forth, they just keep touching each other. And so it's like,
it's kind of like John Wick in a way.
Him.
I think John Wick Chapter 2.
It is.
Right? Where, like, everyone around, it's like basically everyone around him could essentially be Azazel, right? And I like the guy is this another big kind of this big intimidating guy, looks like he should be in the mob, right?
Yeah.
Comes by and says, "Beware my wrath," right? It's the type of scene that you would also kind of associate maybe at like the end of a TV episode.
Yeah.
Like your penultimate episode of something leading into, right? The very appropriate scene for the kind of the midway point of this movie.
Yeah.
He goes back in the station, looks at Lou, and is like, "Lou, why are you singing?" It's like, "No,
I wasn't singing. Mike was singing, and
like,
then
this guy was like,
lady that Mike touched
like
was
you
singing.
were like, there was some '60s shit though. Why? I hated the '60s.
Yeah, I hated the 60s.
Why would I be singing that?" So, and he's confused. So then he cuts back, and it's he's meeting Milano now, and then now they're kind of in this open kind of space in this building. It's this building. I guess kind of a central atria of this building, right? Where they're outside, but they're surrounded. And she kind of starts giving an exposition dump about the demons, and people are kind of looking out for them.
It's interesting because there are people around the outskirts of this room they're in, this like atrium, and they're in the middle of this circle.
Oh yes,
like there's a circle made of tile, in the center of this room, and they're the only ones inside this circle.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and there are other people there. They're just outside the circle.
The circle of trust.
Yeah, but they never go into it, but it makes it seem kind of like it's sort of a circle of protection kind of thing. It has sort of that
edge of protection.
Yeah, it has sort of that feeling to it. But yeah, like I said, they don't actually go into that. So it's probably just they're standing in the middle of a room and nobody else is around them.
He's like going like, what have I seen here? What does all this mean? And like I said, she gives kind of an exposition dump. And it's like, he's just like, oh, that doesn't all make sense. It's like, I'm a detective. I follow facts and evidence. She's like, I'm a professor. Like, I do the same thing. But I've seen things that don't add up to the facts and the evidence. Like, you have to admit that some things fall outside of that.
Yeah. And so they're also talking about how he did a little bit more research on Azazel and about demons, and how demons. First, Greta is explaining a little bit more about demons to him, and she's like, "Well, when demons, when God created everything, He created angels, and some of the angels fell." And so those fallen angels can't survive on their own. They need a host. They need a human host. And so most people, they're able to, enter them by touch. But there are a few people out there. There are a few of us that were put here to fight them, to protect others against them. And those people they can't enter them through touch. But when they're in their spirit form, then they're stronger. And so they're able to break through those boundaries and be able to possess the person. And then Hobbs chimes in and he's like, yeah. And so in my reading, I found that when they're in their spirit form, they can survive for the length of one breath. And they can travel up to 500 cubits, which then he gets an explanation of what a cubit is.
We get more into about the cubits part of it later, but Right. They get more exact later, but yeah, that's kind of what they have right now.
Yeah. So 500 cubits. A cubit is the distance between your elbow and the fingertips, basically, roughly.
Right, and that's what we'll talk about later.
Yeah. So they mention it here too. They mention it. They talk about it more later, but they mention the elbow to the fingertips part here, and that 500 cubits is roughly a fifth of a mile. And that's about all they say about it at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, so then, Hobbs is like, so what? I'm one of those people. I'm one of these people that was put here to.
She's like, I don't know, but maybe. And, so yeah, there's anyone that could potentially be able to fight them off, right? And kill that demon, so to speak, kill that fallen angel.
Yeah, because Greta's talking about the similarities between Hobbs and her father. How he was also one of these people that it couldn't enter by touch.
We don't know specifically about her, though.
No.
So they decide that, what, they really shouldn't be seen together anymore. They kind of protect each other.
Yeah.
Especially Greta. Like, she seems on the down low, hidden away, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but she leaves, and then she's starting, she's walking through the streets. It's, it's kind of like downtown Philly. And we get that view of her now, right? And you can tell that she gets a sense that someone's following her.
Yeah.
And I love how the camera plays. Like, it almost seems like she's going to be using the windows of these stores downtown to see who might be following her.
Exactly. I love that. Yeah, she's every window that she passes, she's like looking in it to see the reflection of who's right behind her.
Yeah. It's shot really well. It's acted really well. Right?
Yeah, because she knows she's being followed.
Finally, she gets cornered, right?
Yeah.
And
so she kind of gets
Beckel.
Yeah, so she kind of gets pushed barely into an alley.
Yeah. And
she is cornered by this guy who is clearly being very aggressive with her right in front of everybody. And nobody's stopping to help. Nobody's stopping to help. I mean, you'd think that he would have taken her a little bit farther into the alley.
No.
Instead of right on the corner there.
No, it's really, and like, it's large enough. Like, it's not like a sketchy alley. Like, it's like this alley that goes back behind some major, like, stores or whatever, right? And there's a lot of people pass on this sidewalk.
Yeah. And none of them try to stop and see what's going on.
And then, like, she's like kind of resisting him, and then he realizes quickly, like, oh, because that's like the first thing he leads off is like, oh, I was just going to tap you on the shoulder.
Yeah. It's like, I was just going to tap you on the shoulder, but
because that's how every man, it's like, oh yeah, I didn't mean to startle you. I was only going to tap you on the shoulder.
Yeah. So, she's able to duck under his arm and start running. And then you just see him tap somebody, and then they tap somebody, Like, it's just this chain of tapping that's chasing her.
Right. Well, like, there's a delivery that kind of comes down towards the alley, and she uses that to like kind of get away. And then it becomes like this chase. Well, before that happens, he looks at her. It's like, I know you, don't I?
Oh yeah.
Right. And it's so like, yeah, like she's Milano's daughter, so he sees somewhat of the
it's like, you look familiar.
Similarity.
I know I've seen you before.
So yeah, and she's able to get away because it's like a delivery or something that starts to come down. Someone's gonna bring down the alley, and and it almost becomes like a domino effect of all these people tapping themselves on this out trying to capture her, and she
basically it's like she's trying to outrun the wave.
Yeah,
she's trying to outrun the wave of tapping, and she gets to a cab, and she jumps in the cab, and she's like, drive, and the cab driver's not doing anything. He's just sitting there. And then the guy that was closest to her, comes running in and just dives through the window of this cab. And she kind of, moves over to the other seat and try to get away from him, trying not to get touched. And then the cab driver takes off and the guy falls out of the window. And then, somebody else comes up to ask him if he's okay, and he touches him and switches bodies.
So we get back to Hobbs, and he's back at his house, and gets in there, and then he sees Art, his brother, who is clearly been beat up.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, was this was, yeah, we missed a scene earlier when he was out playing basketball with the kids.
Yeah, that's before he goes up to the cabin when they're playing basketball.
Yeah. So, I mean, not a super important scene, but just a little bit more interaction between Hobbs and his brother and nephew.
And actually, Jonesy comes in at that scene to give him some information too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
so
he comes in.
His brother's definitely been beat up.
Yeah, his brother. He's standing there. He's got a rag that he's holding up, trying to hide his eye.
And he's like, "Oh, I fell."
He's like, Hobbs is like, "Come on, show me your eye. What happened?" So he shows him the eye. Shows that he has a black eye, and he's like, "I fell." He's like, "Art, people don't fall and get a black eye." What happened? Well, before this though, when he was getting out of the car to go into the apartment, Sam, his nephew, is sitting in a tree,
waving at him,
and Sam's friend Toby is sitting down at the base of the tree.
Yes.
And I thought this was odd here. So, he's waving at him, and then he says, "Hi, Unc." The only time in the entire movie that Sam calls him Unc.
Yes.
The rest of the time, it's always Uncle John.
Yep. It is
Uncle John or Uncle Johnny.
There's going to be a weird thing about this. We'll touch on very, very quickly, very shortly.
Mm-hmm.
So, he gets his brother to talk, and he's like, "Oh yeah, well, he hit me."
Yeah, Sam hit me. I mean, it was an accident. It was an accident. Don't worry. It was, but yeah, Sam hit me.
And then we get the realization, and Hobbs seeing him waving his hand as he was.
Yeah, and he had this smirk on his face.
So he's about to leave their apartment or house in the smirk, right? And Sam's there, and Sam just seems normal, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, "Oh, where's Toby? Outside."
Yeah. So he sends Sam back in with Art,
and he gets outside and he sees him, and he's like, "Hey, Hobbs."
Yeah. Toby's sort of sitting on the hood of Hobbs' car.
And this is when you get Denzel.
And
this is when you get Denzel Washington chasing a 10-year-old.
Yes. Yes. So he chases Toby,
and they come around the corner, and there's this guy that kind of walks out of like a driveway area or alley area, and Toby runs into him.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and now Toby has touched this other guy. So Azazel as Toby has touched
Azazel
him. Now he can kind of figure out Azazel passes between people.
Yeah. And so then he sees Toby. He runs up to him. He's like, "Toby, are you okay?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm fine." He's like, "Go home."
Toby's one of the lucky ones in this movie. Ultimately.
Yeah. So he's like, "Toby, go home." And so Toby runs home. And
the other guy goes into his car, and you see him. He's not trying to drive off. You see him kind of reach down,
and he pulls out a gun, and he starts shooting at Hobbs. So Hobbs jumps behind a car,
and there's other
people. He pulls his gun.
And it's a city, so other people are witnessing this, right? And once the shots get fired, right, some duck behind their cars, and others kind of
And this is
scoot
the guy
off,
played
whatever.
by Bob Rumnock, by the way.
Yes. And now you have, Denzel screaming at him to, Hobbs, drop the gun, right? Put it down. He won't. And so Hobbs shoots him dead.
Mm-hmm. They're right in the middle of the street.
Yep.
With all these onlookers.
And then one of them, this lady, comes up to him.
Well, we see this, once Hobbs shoots
That's right.
the guy,
Thank
then
you.
we
That's right.
see the point of view of Azazel again.
Yeah. And it passes into this, youngish lady,
Mm-hmm.
right? And comes in, Azazel now has possessed her, and she comes up to him and just starts taunting.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. So then we get, then she leaves, and we get Hobbs just sitting on the curb waiting.
Yep. And now you got
Jonesy comes up, and Stanton comes up.
The rest of the cops are there. You have EMTs. You have the news.
So what's weird here is, they never really specify what time of day all this happened.
Right.
But Stanton doesn't get there until the sun's down.
No. Yeah. And so, yep.
I mean, the sun's pretty high in the sky when this happens.
And at this point, like, Hobbs is trying to figure out how he's going to spin this. Like,
Mm-hmm. He was
there's some witnesses out there, but like he's just trying to figure out, like, well, why was the gun drawn on him in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
He was like, I was chasing this kid, and then this other guy pulled a gun on me.
Yeah.
Right.
Chasing this kid, and then the kid bumped into somebody, and then that guy pulled a gun on me. Yeah.
And then so when he realized, and what he finds out quickly at that point is that gun
was full of blanks. Yep. Gun was full of blanks. But, I mean, justifiably, that does not really matter in this case, because he didn't know that it was blanks.
Especially within that situation.
Mm-hmm.
If you see a guy reach into a car and you're not right next to him, he pulls out a gun and he shoots the gun. Like, it
is very reasonable to assume that those are not blanks.
Assume that there are live rounds in that gun.
Mm-hmm.
They see some news talking to some of the witnesses, and you can see something like, oh, I don't know exactly what happened.
And we find out that this guy was a school teacher.
He's a newlywed, and he's a beloved school teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely not making things any better. So,
yeah.
So, he back at the station, and that Stanton's talked with the guy's wife and all of this. And, before he goes back to the station, he looks at his brother and he's like, stay at home. Don't open the door, lock the doors, close the windows, yada, 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 right?
Don't let anybody in.
So, he's back at the station, and, his lieutenant's like, I can't believe you put him in this position. It's like, they also found, now they found your prints at one of the other scenes, one of your fucking coins, right? It's like anyone could have put that there. Like, it's like,
so he's just like,
no, like, you gotta lay low on this right now.
So he's just like, go home, get some rest. And so Hobbs goes home.
So before he leaves, he's sitting at his desk, with Jonesy, and
Jonesy's like, it was a clean shoot.
They're having a deep kind of philosophical conversation. And then you say, well, no, but my wife, she thinks some people here is here for like one thing, to help do one thing, right?
Yeah. And so
for her, it's just to make lasagna.
Yeah. Right? So I was like, so you're here for this one thing and nothing else? What happens when you do that one thing? And
I don't know. You die?
It's like, well, when it's time, how do you know? when it's time for you to do that one thing, how do you know? And Jonesy's just like, well, when it's time, you'll know.
This scene gave me very Lost vibes.
Yeah. Yep.
Because whenever someone came to an actual epiphany and Lost, they died.
Yeah. Yeah. So so Hobbs goes home and Sam is sitting on the floor playing Game Boy. And he's like, hey, Sam, where's your dad? Like, he's still sleeping.
Oh, he's still sleeping.
You're home early. And so, this worries Hobbs. So he goes over and knocks on Art's door. And then, there's no answer. So he goes in there and Art's laying on the bed on his side. And Hobbs, starts talking to him and he's not moving. He goes and sits down, checks his pulse on his wrist, and he doesn't feel a pulse. So he goes around, checks the pulse on his neck, still doesn't feel a pulse. And then he sees a syringe with a yellow liquid in it.
Yep.
And he opens up his shirt. Well, no, first. Yeah, before he went in there. That's right. Before he went in there, he was talking to Sam, and Sam was saying, why'd you do that? Why'd you do that last night? It's like, what are you talking about? Tickle in my chest. And so he pulls down the top, the collar of Sam's shirt, and he sees an A written on his chest.
Yes.
So then he goes, that's when he goes to Art's room, and he checks him, finds no pulse, and sees the syringe. And then he opens up Art's shirt, and he sees LYPSE. Or
yes. Oh, it's like the school teacher had it on his chest also.
Yeah. It had APA.
POC.
Yes, that's right. POC.
Yeah. Which is really crazy how Azazel was able to plan to know that was going to happen.
Yeah.
That he was to have that gun ready right there in the car, right? And to know that he was going to come out and at that exact time. Very, very interesting. Yeah. Anyway. So
right then,
that's what I said. That's when he goes in. He finds that.
Gets up. He goes into Art's closet. He pulls out a bunch of clothes. Walks out. Hands. Packing. Yeah. Hands some of the clothes. Hands some of the clothes to Sam. He's like, put these on. Get dressed really quick. We got to go.
He's like, yeah, he's sleeping, right?
Yeah, because
he gets a phone call.
He gets a phone call.
It's Jonesy telling him that they're going to come to arrest him.
Yeah, they're coming to take him in, and so he puts on.
And there's the news is on in the background, and there's a witness saying that the shooting was unprovoked. That he just shot him.
And this witness is the same woman that was talking to Hobbs.
Yes. So as they're kind of leaving out the back of the house and they're on the road, like she's there and she's looking at him again. Right. So
and she kind of smiles at him,
and they're on the run. They're basically hiding with all the homeless people.
Yeah. So they
under the subway.
They get on the bus. Or is it? They get on the bus or the subway? I think they get on the bus.
Subway.
And
it's a subway, I thought, or maybe it is a bus.
It's a bus for the nuns. There's a group of nuns sitting on the bus, and
he's looking through, and then he pieces together that says apocalypse.
Yeah, and so
some of you, if you know Bible, might have already pieced that together. But he goes, "There's like, well, it's like, sister, do you know what apocalypse means?" She's like, "Oh, That's the Greek for revelation.
He's like, as in the book of the Bible, Revelation? He's like, yeah.
It's like, yes, the last book. It's like, okay. And so he's like, and he's thinking like, it's like 18:2, right? And so is that like the chapter and the verse? And they get off and they have to avoid the cops at some point because they recognize them.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and they have this complex. Then that's when they get down with the homeless people, the unhoused, and they're talking about things, and he's just telling, he's like, yeah, no, the cops think I did something wrong because someone set me up to do it, or set it up to make it look like I did it.
Yeah.
And then
Sam's like, yeah, I saw that on TV. I saw that.
That's right.
I saw something like that on TV.
It's like, I got to tell you something else. Your dad's, it's like my dad's not sleeping, is he?
No. Because when they were leaving the apartment, then Sam's like, hey, where's my dad? And he's like, he's still sleeping. And yeah, so he's like, my dad's not sleeping, is he? And Hobbs like, no, he's not. And then Sam's like, do you think he'll go to heaven? And without missing a beat, Hobbs like, yes. If there's anybody who deserves to go to heaven, it's your dad.
Which is true. Like, we haven't really talked much about Art, but like,
Art seems like a very, very sweet guy.
Sweet guy, great guy. He loves his brother, loves his son.
Yeah.
What a shitty end.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There's a lot of characters that have died in movies that like, wow, that's shitty.
No, but you hate to see Art.
He's one of them.
He's
one of the shittiest deaths in any movie.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say it.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I mean, it's like,
played by Gabriel Cassius, by the way.
And that's right. Yeah. Gabriel Cassius. So, but it's, he just asked, like, well, do you think it hurt? And Hobbs looks like,
I don't think so.
No, son, I don't think it did. So they eventually make it over
to Greta's house.
Yeah. And it's again, this is winter now. Like you've seen some snow on the road. Like there, you can see where there's some tire tracks. Like it's a little dusting on the road. She's got a fire going, and right. Hobbs tells them to go stand by the fire and get warm. And they're talking about things, and it's like, yeah, I got to figure this out. And that's when they get the conversation again about like the cubits, and it's like, I think that if you can get him, to try to figure out how I can get him to die, and I have a time to get away, and then he's isolated so that Zazzle just dies. He's a demon or a fallen angel, right? But he's not immortal, right? You got to think of angels or demons being immortal, right? But the entire premise here is that some of these fallen are mortal, right? And so you have to, they found the way to kill them, quote unquote.
So here, real quick, when he was sitting talking to Sam about Art, he reached into his sock and he had a pack of cigarettes. Right. He pulled them out of his sock.
That's right. Yes.
And Sam's like, wait, I thought you quit smoking. He's like, I did. And so we know that he has cigarettes on him right now. And so while they're at Greta's place, they're talking about, trying to figure out how to kill Azazel. Because these fallen are mortal. But that this is when we find out that when they're in their spiritual form, then they're stronger than they are when they're in a human. And so that's why they can break through the barriers and get into those people that they can't get through touch.
Which is interesting, but I'll buy it, whatever.
But they only have a limited lifespan when they're in their spiritual form.
Yeah, that's the paces.
They can only last for the
He
length of a
devises
breath, of a single breath. And in that time, they can travel up to 500 cubits.
So,
but
he decides he's going to go back to the cabin.
Well, first we see, so Greta is talking to Sam. Sam is on the couch, and Greta's in there talking to him, and Hobbs is on the kitchen floor, sitting there, and we see him open up the pack of cigarettes. We see him take the plastic wrap off it.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
And then we don't see anything else. Then it just cuts over to Greta and Sam. And then then Hobbs comes in and he's talking to Sam. He's like, hey, he's sort of tucking him in on the couch and say, hey, I gotta go. Greta's going to take care of you for a while. I just want you to know that you're going to hear some things about me. And I want you to know that whatever you hear about me, whatever it was,
true.
I did it because I love you.
Oh, that's right. Yep. So he tells Greta that they should get away and find a place that he doesn't even know about.
Yeah, and then, then Sam is like, I'm going to go to sleep and I'm going to wake up and everything's going to be back to normal.
It's a good attitude to have.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. And so, then, he sort of lays his head down and closes his eyes and, Hobbs kisses him on the forehead. And then, he goes and talks to Greta. It's like,
you gotta feel bad for Sam. I mean, we know what's coming.
Yeah.
Like it's an interesting way of how things have to unfold for him as a person.
Yeah.
So
he's talking to Greta. He's like, take him somewhere that nobody knows about, not even me.
The other family cabin. So he gets back up at the cabin. It's nighttime now, and he's sitting there and standing in the cabin. He's waiting.
Mm-hmm. And then he sees headlights coming up the street, coming up the road. Because he had gotten a call from Jonesy.
Yeah, like Jonesy alerted him to leave his house, that they were coming to arrest him.
Yeah, so he gets a call from Jonesy, and he's like,
he gets that. That's why he gets it while he's up there.
He's like, while he's up there, he's like, place. I just I needed to go, get some air out by the lake. Because he knows that Jonesy's not the only one on the call. Because Lou and Stanton are both listening. And he worded it the way that he did because he knows that Jonesy knows what he's talking about when he says he needs to go out by the lake.
Right.
And so, he sees the car coming up the road. And he calls out, to Azazel. And he's like, first he yells something in Syrian Aramaic. And then starts, just yelling at Azazel. And you're like, you're here. Then Stanton comes walking out.
He's like, what are you going on about?
Like, it's you?
he wasn't expecting. Like, okay,
he wasn't expecting Stanton. He was expecting Jonesy to come out, but not Stanton.
Expecting Jonesy, and they're talking, and he's like, you should come in, right? And as they're talking, that's when Jonesy comes out of the woods.
Mm-hmm. And he's like, you're here too? It's like, this is throwing a wrench in the works because he had a plan, and having more than just him and Azazel kind of ruins his plan.
Yeah, three makes it more difficult than two.
Mm-hmm. So, they're all talking. He still thinks that Stanton is Azazel, and Jonesy's talking to him. He's like, "Come on, let's just come in and let's bring you in." and he won't go. So Jonesy pulls his gun on him.
Jonesy's like, yeah, well, you know what? It's like, and Jonesy has ideas like, how about if he just disappears?
Mm-hmm. No one
has to know.
He goes off into the woods. We lose him in the woods, and just disappears. And Stanton's like, no, we can't do that. We got to take him in. And meanwhile, Hobbs has a gun. He's got a little snub-nosed revolver that he's just holding. He's not pointing it at anybody right now. He's just holding it.
Mm-mm.
And so Jonesy has his gun drawn. And he's telling him, drop the gun. Right? And so he does. He drops the gun. And they're all talking. And then Jonesy's like, I didn't want it to have to come to this. Sorry, Stanton. And he shoots Stanton in the head.
Yeah. Just blows his brains out.
And then points his gun back at Hobbs. And Hobbs is like, it was you. You're Azazel. Right? And so,
of course, we've been waiting for a while for it to happen with Jonesy.
And Jonesy starts singing.
The way John Goodman can do it.
Uh-huh.
John Goodman has flipped himself completely.
Yes.
Now, being this dedicated, loyal partner.
He is just turned on a dime.
This taunting, evil fuck.
Yeah. And he's just, John Goodman's so great in this scene.
Yes.
He's just fantastic in this scene.
At first, he pretends like he's going to give him time to run away. He's like, then no.
So he's, points the gun at Hobbs's head, and so Hobbs kind of tackles him, and they're wrestling over the gun, and then it goes off, and Jonesy has been shot in the stomach.
Yeah.
And so he kind of falls back, and he's like, why? He's like, why didn't you shoot me in the head? He's like, because it would have been too quick. I need the time. And he pulls out his cigarettes, and he puts one in his mouth, lights it, and he starts smoking. And Jonesy's like, I thought you quit. He's like, I did. These things will kill you.
And he means literally right now.
Because, these things will kill you, especially when they're laced with the same poison you killed your victims with. And then Azazel realizes what's going on.
You fuck.
Yeah. Azazel realizes what he's doing.
Azazel, not Jonesy.
And so, so he's sitting there smoking his poison cigarettes while Jonesy is, bleeding out. Then he takes a few more puffs. He has Jonesy's gun now. Takes a few more puffs, raises the gun, says, I'm sorry, Jonesy, and shoots him right between the eyes.
And it pains him. You can tell it pains him.
Yeah.
It's his partner. Yeah. He loves the guy.
Yeah. It's his partner.
And it means for him to become possessed like that, but he feels he has no choice at that point.
Mm-hmm. And so then we see Azazel's point of view, and he leaves Jonesy and he goes up, and the only other living being around is Hobbs. So he's forced to go into this poisoned body. And what we didn't mention was when Hobbs got to the cabin this time, the first thing he did when he got out of his car was throw his keys into the woods.
Yes.
He threw his car keys into the woods so that he wouldn't know where they were.
That. It's a very good point.
So, as soon as Azazel enters Hobbs's body, he gets up and he runs. Like he's
frantically running.
We get that running that we saw at the very beginning of the movie.
Yep.
That sort of half crawl running, sort of stumbling. And he gets out there to the keys, and we get the voiceover again. And then picks up the keys. Yeah, there it was, outsmarted. And
I didn't think I'd die like this.
Yeah. But so he picks up the keys and then he just collapses. He's laying there in the snow. He's like, but if you remember, I told you I was going to tell you how I almost died. And this is where we find out ultimately that the voiceover that's been going on throughout the movie is Azazel, not Hobbs.
It's not Hobbs. This is Azazel.
So we see, from Azazel's point of view again, he leaves Hobbs' body because Hobbs has died. And, when he's like, remember, I told you this is the story of how I almost died. We see that gray cat that we saw earlier run into the house. And it comes walking out. And then we see Azazel's point of view again, and he goes into the cat.
And the cat walks away.
The cat walks away.
The next thing we got, like a view of the city. And you have some Sympathy for the Devil playing.
Yes. The Guns N' Roses version of Sympathy for the Devil. Which I know a lot of people might not agree with this, but I actually prefer the Guns N' Roses version to the Stones version. I'm not a big fan of the Rolling Stones.
Yeah, I'm not either, but I don't think at this point we have to feel like that's a
yeah, true,
big thing to say. At least I hope not.
Yeah.
I'm also not a big fan of Bruce Springsteen.
I'm not a huge fan of Springsteen either, but yeah.
This is not our musical adventure.
Billy Joel, though, he's great.
But yeah, no, it's such an interesting ending, right? Because this climax. You got Goodman, Sutherland, and Washington, and it kind of goes in different ways.
Mm-hmm. And it makes it all seem like he's got him. Makes it seem like he's finally outsmarted Azazel and he's able to kill him. But no,
It sucks that he had to kill John Goodman to do it. But which is kind of one of those twists that man, he's got to kill off his friend and all this. But no, he dies too, and the demon still escapes.
Mm-hmm.
So
go on
the fallen angels
terrorize more.
And who knows who the next person is going to be? We'll float around, and maybe in some 30 years we'll have Jonesies and Hobbs' names stricken from the record because of this incident. I don't know.
And then, maybe there's going to be a sequel one of these days, of Fallen and I Can't Get Up.
The Julia White story.
Well, yeah, that's Fallen.
It's Fallen. Yeah, I think it ends on such a good note because the expect of where some of it's going.
Mm-hmm.
It's a kind of mostly predictable movie, and the idea of a serial killer living on by passing on the people. Now, granted, here it's actually a fallen angel.
Mm-hmm.
Not just someone's spirit moving into someone else's body, right?
Yeah.
Which has happened in other, sci-fi, lit. But even the Exorcist 3 is, I had heavy vibes of this and from that. But
okay, see,
yeah,
I haven't seen Exorcist 3.
It's a fun movie.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it's a very enjoyable movie. It's a good, solid movie. Like I said before, with this cast, I don't know how it was so overlooked.
Especially as Denzel Washington's become more entrenched. It should be one that people can go back on because it's I think of some of his other movies in that time period, like The Bone Collector.
Yeah.
In particular.
Yep.
This is a better movie.
Yeah. It is.
It's well made, it's well shot and constructed and acted. The story, acting, it all comes together. And it does it so well.
Yeah, it really does. But But yeah, so it it really should have it hits the right notes on what it's trying to do. Mixing
I
that
think we talked about that
with the
with some of the other
noir,
movies,
with
and
everything that's going on there, the supernatural, it hits the right notes on those things.
it understands what it is and executes that really, really well.
Yeah.
Because we talked about it earlier. Like it had a lot of the noirish elements, and yeah, you got the Vital, right? Because at first you don't know who she is. Like she could be dangerous, right?
Yeah.
Um, you kind of have this kind of a broken type of character, and the working through a mystery, and plays both of those motifs off really, really well.
Yeah. I mean, it could have easily just become a copy of Seven.
Yeah, definitely.
But it didn't. Because they added those other elements to it. They added the noir. They added the supernatural. They added just all these more minor things in those, that made it its own story.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's shot well. Like again, like the tiny scenes, really help to sell it.
Yeah. So that being said, do we have anything else that you want to?
I think that wraps it up for me.
About it, I think so too. So, as always, if you enjoy what you're hearing, go ahead and check us out on Facebook and Instagram and Threads. We are Rob and Tony's Cinematic Adventure. The and is spelled out, A-N-D. It's not an ampersand like it is in the name of the podcast. We are also on X or Twitter. That is R&T Cinematic. And we are also on Letterboxd if you want to check out our movie reviews on various movies. Some we've done on the podcast, some we haven't done, some we will do, some we won't do. But that is Cine Adventure or Cine Adventure. CINE Adventure. So, yeah, check out our Letterboxd. Send us an email. We're Rob and Tony's Cinematic Adventure at gmail.com. Once again, the and is spelled out, A-N-D. It's not an ampersand like the name of the podcast. But yeah, just let us know, what did you think of Fallen? Had you ever heard of it before? Let alone seen it. What did you think of it? Did you enjoy it? Did you hate it? We want to hear. We want to know what you thought. Do you want us to do other movies like this? Other similar style, that noirish, maybe supernatural spin on things.
There's plenty of them.
Just let us know. We want to hear from you. We want to be able to talk about movies that you want to hear us talk about. And if you did enjoy what you're hearing, then go ahead and go to our social media. Give us a like and a follow. Go to your favorite podcast app, wherever you're listening to us. Give us a good rating, a good review, some good comments. That's how we move up in the standings and the search and the recommendations, all that stuff. But yeah, just help us to find more listeners, that more people that want to hear us ramble on and on about these movies that we love so much.
That's right.
Because we really do love talking about these things, and we love that you guys like to listen to us talk about these things. So, anyway, next time we are going to be starting up. It is that time of year. We had our little mini series. It is that time of year,
isn't it?
Yes, it is. We had our little mini series of, lesser remembered movies leading up to our summer blockbuster series. We loved doing it so much last year. We're going to do it again this year. Now that Memorial Day is just around the corner. Our next
it is anon.
Our next episode will be coming out right after Memorial Day. So that is going to be the beginning of the summer blockbuster season.
I'm excited for what we're doing too.
I am too.
because I think it pairs well with the one we kicked off with last year.
Yes, it does. It does. And why don't you tell these fine folks what movie that is?
So last summer, if you recall, we started with Jaws, the Steven Spielberg classic, which is rightfully remembered as the first summer blockbuster. So we want, we looked around and we thought about it. And there's another movie that actually did really well at the box office, which you may not have known, but was definitely a blockbuster in the summer of 1979. And it shares kind of a similar, theme and roots to Jaws, which is, some kind of rightfully say is a movie that kind of keeps people out of the oceans and scared a bunch of people. In 1979, we had a haunted house on a spacecraft, which would scare people.
Yes.
And that movie was Alien.
Yes, it was.
So we will do Alien to kick off our summer blockbuster series, which was one of the biggest hits in the summer of 1979.
We considered doing Alien last year because last year was the 45th anniversary, but it didn't quite fit with what we were doing then. But right now, we think it is the perfect movie to kick off this summer blockbuster series.
Yes. And we can discuss all of that next week.
Yes.
And I'm very excited to talk about this.
So am I.
I love this movie.
Yes, it is a fantastic movie. And it'll be great to watch it again.
It will.
So, with all that said, join us next time for Alien.